Welcome to the GAMERamble video review for Morph Girl, narrated by me, Darkcloud. As always, the full text version of this review can be found on the GAMERamble website linked below. The TLDR is that Morph Girl is an interesting visual novel that combines a 90s style FMV with Japanese horror. The game follows a woman mourning her wife's death, so the story might be a bit too somber for anyone looking for a light-hearted experience. It is also relatively short, and the acting could have been better, but despite its flaws, Morph Girl still offers a unique and compelling experience. Gameplay receives a 6 out of 10. Morph Girl is passive for the most part, but there are some choices to be made. Graphics receives a 7 out of 10. Visually, the game makes use of FMV to convey its storyline. Sound receives a 7 out of 10. There's no voice acting, but the haunting soundtrack keeps things interesting. The overall score for Morph Girl is 6.7 out of 10. And now for the full review. Alana Pierce's life is shattered by the tragic loss of her spouse Rebecca. The devastating event leaves Alana as a grieving widow, unable to move forward. She merely survives each day, spending her time immersed in Rebecca's journals and the movies that held significance for her late wife. However, amidst Alana's grief, her home is infiltrated by a supernatural entity, taking the form of a long-haired woman. The game places responsibility on players to guide Alana through this unexpected turn of events and determine if there's a chance for her to reclaim a semblance of a normal life. The premise for Morph Girl is quite interesting and clearly inspired by Japanese horror movies such as The Ring and The Grudge. The game mimics the FMV titles that flooded the market during the 90s, but the developer clearly had a much lower budget. The result is a game filled with an iPhone, and stars the developer's girlfriend as both Alana and Rebecca. To make things a little more atmospheric, the video quality has been manipulated to look like something from home VHS tape, and the game also uses a monochrome palette instead of full color. While this means that Morph Girl doesn't look as good as contemporary attempts at the genre, such as the infectious madness of Dr. Decker, it definitely fits the tone and style of the game. The game also opts to use text instead of speech, meaning a lot of reading is involved. Most of the reading involves flashback stories about how the relationship between Rebecca and Alana became strained when the former became ill. Morph Girl isn't just a passive experience either, as occasionally you get to make a choice that influences how the story plays out. These choices eventually lead to one of 6 different endings, which is good as the game is relatively short and can easily be completed in a single sitting. While the different endings are rather interesting, the paths that lead to them are not always that compelling. Alana spends the first part of the story in a fog of grief, and even when the supernatural elements start to ramp up, her reactions are unusually calm. The result is a game that maintains an atmosphere that ranges from uneasy to creepy, but never really crosses over into horror. While this approach is fine, the slow pace will probably disappoint players expecting something more in line with the Japanese horror genre. The story favors a more psychological horror approach, instead of the over-the-top blood and gore, but could have benefited from more convincing acting. One aspect of Morph Girl that is done very well is the music, as the game makes good use of audio to maintain the creepy atmosphere. Although there isn't a whole lot of variety, the game makes the most of what it has when it comes to music. Some people might consider the lack of voice acting a negative, but the silence works much better when it comes to maintaining the somber mood of the game. The interface is simple but straightforward, since Morph Girl plays out like a visual novel with FMV. Due to the length of the game, there's not much that can be said about the story of Morph Girl without giving away too much. The writing is interesting, but not mind-blowing, and while the acting is quite convincing for the most part, it falls a little flat during the supernatural portions. Nevertheless, Morph Girl is certainly interesting enough to warrant a playthrough or two, especially with its wallet-friendly price tag. If you're not a fan of FMV or the visual novel genre, there isn't much here for you, but everyone else should give it a go. Thanks for joining me for this Morph Girl PC review. Remember to like, subscribe and share. Until next time.